Are you guys hearing any of my room noise? No? Okay, good. A little hectic morning.
Good morning.
Yes.
Welcome to Los Angeles.
Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here, Alex.
Yep. And remember that, this is we're going old school Saturday, so it doesn't have to be 2 hours. It'll be as long as people ask to ask questions. We don't have to hold it anywhere.
Yes.
Alex, are you in LA all week?
Until Wednesday. Yeah.
Oh, but SIGGRAPH, I thought, is in LA, is that?
Monday. Yeah. I'm in. Yeah. That's so. Tuesday and Wednesday, I'll be in LA. I'm in LA right now. I just finished the production summit. Well, I didn't finish. Everybody finished it.
Good morning. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're joining us from YouTube and other places, go to officehours.global to find out more about what we do here. Today, we're going to go old school and do 2 hours of Q&A, where normally we would take a second hour and focus on something that we want to spend more time on. Today, that's just going to be your questions. And speaking of questions, let's jump right in. Robert, what's our first question?
Thank you, Laura. We start here with David Brady from New York, New York. Saw this on the companion Facebook user group and thought it was an excellent talking point. 4 Streamdecks in a 2RU mount, ships August 14th. Light up the sails, and stagehand.hacks, link provided.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, it looks amazing. So what if you're listening to this, what they're showing is they figured out a way. They built out a rack that you can take your Stream Decks and just insert them into a 19-inch rack. So it looks like a 2U rack that you can put Stream Decks into, and now you have basically a rack panel. So for those of us who do a lot of production with some kind of, it can either be a rack in front of us or potentially what we call a turret. The turret is this kind of piece that holds usually up to about 6 or 8U that's leaned back a little bit, and now you can put those Stream Deck controls right into the rack. Oh, it looks good. I'm glad that David showed it to us. I'm definitely gonna watch that and possibly get one because it's I have a lot of racks, so having those controls and something that's a little more controllable looks really cool.
Next question
from Simon Ray, Midlands, United Kingdom. What kit would you recommend for someone live streaming a tour around their local town to Zoom? What would make the shots more stable and make it easier for the broadcaster to listen and interact with Zoom?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, if you want to interact with Zoom, you might want to think. It just depends on how much money you want to spend. There are lots of ways of doing this at different price points. The most straightforward way is probably going to be building some kind of rig with your iPhone. So an iPhone is going to give you a great camera. You can swap it back and forth. You can even do something like a ceremonic input so that you can get a good mic in there. And then think about putting that on some kind of monopod. The monopod is going to let you just set it down and stabilize it. Trying to add anything, if you want to put like mics in or something like that, then you're going to, the stabilizer won't work anymore unless you get a higher end one. So you really want to think about just a monopod, potentially an iPhone. That's going to be the easiest way for you to interact. Now, there's the next step up from that is probably some version of a live view. So that's going to give you bonded cellular. We had live view on earlier this week. And that's going to give you, now the interaction will be slower. So Zoom is about, it's about a second and a half. I'm sorry, Zoom is about 150 milliseconds of latency. The live view is often about a second and a half. So it's about 10 times the latency of Zoom. It's higher quality, but your ability to interact it depends on whether you get a live view that has a return, but that'd be another way to do it. And then other ways that we've done it in the past are very low latency, high speed connections, to something. So it just depends on where you're, like TerraDeck and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of different ways of doing it. If you're going all over town and you want to show it, I would really try an iPhone and go out and jump into something like After Hours, then wander around and just see how it works before you do it.
Tim?
Yeah, I'll just add to what Alex said. Be creative as well, right? Look around your environment, your hotel room or whatever, and look for boxes and blocks and anything you can to fill in any gaps for gear you didn't bring. Back in the day, we didn't have gear for a lot of these things, or at least my budget didn't allow for it. And so it's always great to to be able to think out of the box, pull in some lamps for lighting and use what you can. But I think one of Alex's key points was, make sure everything's stable and secure and not bouncing around and moving. So, but be creative and see what's around you and see what you can utilize to supplement any gear you didn't bring. And of course, take notes and use that for the next time, so you know what gear that you're having to supplement, so you can bring that gear with you next time.
Next question.
From Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. TheatreChat touts that it is the ultimate text chat app designed specifically for live events and allows you to communicate with ease over your existing show network using well-implemented OSC specs. Discuss. And there is a link to the app.
Alex?
Would have to see more. When you go to their website, there's no screen captures, so you have to actually download the whole thing just to figure out what it's doing. It could be a good app, but this is not probably the way that I would approach my marketing.
Tim?
One thing that always intrigues me about text chat apps for production purposes is accessibility, right? One of the things we've been covering lately on Saturdays is accessibility, and text-based apps can work for people with low or no hearing, the deaf and hard of hearing. And, the app can also be made accessible for blind and low vision through screen readers and things like that. So, it definitely brings a wider audience to your production crew. So I'm always intrigued by that. I'm going to download this app and play with it with some of the accessibility tools and see how it does there. But I'm always intrigued at using text for back-end communication.
Absolutely. Next question.
From Brandon Boutron, Indianapolis, Indiana, from the Crime Blotter here. Police believe 2 people found an unattended pallet jack and stole $300,000 worth of gaming cards the day before Gen Con at the Indiana Convention Center. In terms of venue security, what do you do to protect your equipment while loading in?
Alex, you've got quite a bit of experience with this.
Yeah, don't leave it unattended. I'm sorry, but I mean, if I had $300,000 of gaming cards, I probably wouldn't leave them on a pallet. Like that's a you have to always assume that you're under that you can't leave things unattended. The other thing is that especially if something is a high value target, you're not going to leave it there. When we're moving things, we have people moving them. Even if we have someone at the venue moving our stuff, usually we have one of our people that is A, making sure it ends up in the right room, and B, making sure that it doesn't go anywhere. We keep our cases numbered, so we make sure that we didn't leave one behind. You come in the larger the case. So when you get started, when I got started, the cases, we put stuff into milk cartons and those the little square ones, and we put them onto carts, and we just move them over to Moscone because we were a block away. At some point, we got to a point where we were pulling a truck in and rolling them out on their own wheels as road cases. And in between, we had Pelican cases and so on and so forth. But what we tried to do is not have anything outside those cases. Other than someone's backpack, we want everything in a Pelican case or a thing, and then we want to keep someone with those things. And you just have to be careful with it. And then, once you're there, a lot of times we set up cameras and we use, even just like a bunch of nests pointed at each other in different places. So it'd be very hard for you to get to our space without us seeing you. So those are the kind of things we managed overnight. But on a load in, if you've got some high value, and what might happen is you get there, you load it off the dock, they set it down somewhere. So that there's some things you can't control if it has to be a scheduled input. So what happens with convention centers is you usually go to a holding dock or holding parking area. When you brought in one at a time, Teamsters take everything off your off all the pallets off your truck. So the only place I can see that this might have been a problem is it got taken off of the truck and then just set somewhere and someone knew what it was. The other thing that we are careful with is not to put big things on the outside about what's in it. Like, so like I know people love to put their Sony camera or this, and rental companies always want to have what's in it outside of the case. We try to have everything just have numbers, and if we write on what's in it, it's usually some kind of internal code. It's not cameras, switcher, mixer, that kind of thing. That just makes it a target.
Tim, anything to add?
Yeah, of course, Alex has got a lot of experience in loading these big shows in and out, and I agree to not put what's on the box. We've had that issue before, where it's just, I think you add a little extra temptation and awareness to to people that might be looking to do something devious, and use trusted folks. So sometimes you hire someone local to be your attendant for that gear, and if it's someone you don't know, that may not work in your favor.
Next question.
From John Fisher, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, is searching for a desktop HDMI switcher. If it supports the HDMI version I need, are they all basically the same? Is there anything I should look to avoid?
Alex?
Yeah, the HDMI switchers are actually pretty quirky. So if you get ones that are the little $40, $50 ones, you oftentimes are going to find that it clicks when it goes in, and you'll see so if that doesn't bother you, then that's fine. But just know that what you're looking for are ones that are going to seamlessly switch between those, and having those frame correctors in it usually makes them more expensive. The least expensive, high quality HDMI switcher that I've used is an A10 Mini, which you can buy used on eBay for $100 or $150. But those are the kind of these 4 inputs. You can crossfade between them. You can switch between them. They're not very big. I know that you may be looking for something smaller, but as you go below, just be careful of buying it from somewhere you can return it, because what you're going to do is you're going to plug 2 HDMIs in. You'll hit the little button on the front. It'll go back and forth to see what it does to your TV or your signal. And so that's the thing you want to pay attention to as you go through it. But again, I would, if I needed it and I had the space, I'd probably just use an A10.
Next question.
Simon Ray from Midlands, United Kingdom, has another question going mobile. The M1 Mac Mini uses very little power. What device would you recommend to power one off grid for a few hours while still being portable enough to carry around, perhaps in a backpack?
Alex?
Yeah, there's a lot of battery packs. So you're probably moving past like a Jackery in the United States is something that I'd probably look at, and they make a 300 and they make all kinds of sizes. If I was determined, I could probably put the Jackery that I have with me. It's about that kind of size. If I was determined, I could probably put it in a backpack. I might get a little tired after a while, but it's a pretty big battery, and it would last. It would definitely last. But that's once you start talking about backpack, you're also talking about the Mac Mini. Where are you putting that? You may be better off at that point thinking about a laptop. I mean, if you're going to do it, but if you're going to do a Mac Mini and you're going to set it on something that you might move around behind you or with you, then getting one of these kind of camping battery, and they come in very, very small that you could definitely put in a backpack, all the way up to the Mac Mini would probably last all day. So it's just a matter of looking at what the draw is. But Jackery is the one that I have. But there's a lot of different versions of these.
Alex, isn't Anchor one of the other batteries that a lot of people use in the smaller sides?
Anchors are used a lot. I wouldn't necessarily. They don't usually have the horsepower to power something plugged in. You got to get it to. The problem with the Mac Mini is it's not just USB-C. I wish it was. It is it's a figure eight, figure eight house current. So it's got its own power supply. So you have to get that voltage. That's why you take one of these kind of camping batteries, because they have They have an Edison on them and that you can plug in. And so that would be more challenging, is to get. I've never thought about getting a USB-C to Edison connection, but you be careful with the less expensive anchors too. I recently bought a couple that don't work the way I expect them to. So it's after years of using them, I'm not as excited.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
From Bobby Flaherty, Florida. Are there any advantages or disadvantages to having an external 10 terabyte hard drive formatted at exFAT?
John?
exFAT was specifically designed for external drives like this. It's got a huge partition space, and it's cross-platform, so it's a fine choice for an external hard drive.
Next question.
Tulak Lopez Waterman from an undisclosed location traveling in the US. A series on Netflix called The Lincoln Lawyer uses a lot of brill with lens focus shift. Any thoughts on this, if it is an optical or CGI?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so I haven't seen that, so I can't tell you for sure. It's pretty hard to do a tilt shift. I mean, they might be able to figure out a way to. Maybe they figured out a technique to do the tilt shift without doing it in camera. It is hard to do that, because you're talking about bokehs and angles and stuff like that. For a regular show, I probably wouldn't do it that very often. I'd try to figure out how to shoot it that way. But then that also has its challenges, because you've kind of now committed to it. But I would say it's a little bit of a challenge to do that, but it'll be interesting to see, whether they. I'll take a look at it. Yeah, it's an interesting puzzle there. But it would be a very difficult thing to do in CG.
Just a quick reminder that this show will only go as long as the producers send us questions to have a show. So with that, next question.
Next, here we are with Douglas Carmichael. What does the panel think of the use of AI-assisted audio mixing on sports events? The shape of things to come, and a sportsvideo.org link is provided.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that it could work. I mean, the question is at what level. So, what level is that going to be? So, is it going to be something that you're trying to do at a professional level, and there's a lot of people watching? You want people doing that. If you want to have something that is better, like you don't have any talent or any skilled people to do the mix, the AI may do better if you keep it simple. So, I don't think that you necessarily couldn't do it. But it just depends on how many people are watching and how important that stream is. But there's this kind of, I think that what we're going to see with AI is there's this situation where it is that AI will do better than many average or below humans in the not too distant future in many areas, including ours. And so the issue is that you go, well, it's not as good as what we use for TV, but there's a lot of things that aren't on TV that need to still be mixed and still need to still have camera ops and so on and so forth. And so I think that you're going to see that lower level stuff fall away to AI. The challenge that we keep on bringing up here is, if you do that, where do you get the next generation of experts if they don't get to put thousands of hours into mediocre work, and improve themselves? And so I think that the way we educate how people do things, the reaction is probably that people end up having to stay in some kind of trade, schools and so on and so forth much longer, and exit school at a much higher level of expertise. Right now, we kind of get students from colleges that I guess they took some courses, and they're probably, in my opinion, usually not as good as the people that we get without going to school for this, when we hire them for our production. And then we train them up by having them do work. The problem is, if there's no work to do because we can't afford, we have AI to do that, then it becomes challenging. So now you have to have schools that actually can teach these students how to execute at an expert level. And that no schools have had to really do that. So, medical school, yes, because if you screw up, you die. Lawyers, yes. Well, maybe. Anyway, so the and I come from a family of them. So anyway, but the point is that there are areas like a doctor where if you look at how much training doctors go through, that's because it's life or death, and they have to come out of school knowing how to do this. I think that while our work is definitely not life and death, what you're going to see in many, many trades and many, many jobs is that people have to stay in school much longer to be able to compete with AI because they can't learn on the job. They have to learn somewhere else, and to learn how to be effective. And that's going to change a lot of things on our end. And also just there'll be a lot of people that don't make it through that. And then what do we do? So there's a lot of challenges right now when it comes to, AI.
Robert?
Well, and on the video end in the sports area at some of the high-end sporting events, the EVS platform that they use to record and play back uses AI to do super slow-mo, which is pretty cool. So that there's only so many camera angles that can use the super slow-mo because it's kind of hardware governed and you only have so many cameras you can use. So if you want to use some of the other cameras and use them as super slow-mo, they clip it off and send it over the internet, and AI interpolates the in-between frames to make the super slow-mo, send it back to the playback operator, and it's on the air. So that may be a preview to come of a super slow-mo being able to be done with AI.
Next question.
From Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. If you have an iPhone 8 or 10 or earlier, it might be time for an upgrade. Apple will not support the upcoming iOS 17 update. Does this impact you?
Go ahead, Alex.
If I have an earlier phone, I'm probably not expecting to do any hard work. So I don't expect it to run the next operating system. So I think that I would I wouldn't worry about it. I mean, I have an iPhone 8 and I use it as a clock, so I don't know if, I don't think that this would impact me, and I wouldn't update even something like a 10. Like I would just leave it where it's at. So I think it's fine.
Next question.
Mark Steele from Orlando, Florida. I'm enjoying using the new Office Hour radio app and haven't had any problems. Have you had any feedback from others that are having any issues?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, and no, it seems to be working. I've been using it for quite some time. So Wansi Robles wrote this app, and if you go to our Discord, you can see a place where you can download it. It's in the Alex announcements. There's a link for the app. It is iPhone only. I don't know if we're going to spend the time. It's just right now. It's just us trying to solve that problem, and we'll somewhere in the future, if it gets really popular, we'll probably look at an Android version. But we have an iOS version that's now available, and it is a true app. So you're going to download it. The audio is much more stable. If there's something going wrong with the audio on that app, it means that on our streaming side, there's something going wrong, as opposed to before. And the nice thing is it plays in the background. So that's what you weren't sure was going to happen when you're on the web version of Makana. You're not sure if it's going to happen, but now the app will play in the background. It also launches Makana. So the way I get into Makana when I'm not on the show and I just want to view it, or in the morning before I get on the panel, usually I get up and I just open up that app and hit launch Makana, jump into it, and that's where I ask my questions, or look at everybody else's questions, vote on those questions. All that stuff is there in the app. So it's really the most convenient way to get into the Q&A portion of the show.
Tim, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just since I'm a new user of that, since I saw it posted the other day, just providing some live feedback that I love that I can click in and listen to the show while I'm on the move or doing other things, or in the car or something like that. So I think it's going to be a popular resource, and I love the features. I haven't even used it enough to see what Alex just talked about, interacting with Makana on the app, but I just clicked it on and listened to the show while I was doing some other activities, and it was really handy. I
actually think it's going to be the number one way people enjoy the show is going to be through that app. So it's I'm pretty excited about it.
Next question.
Paul Wallace from Austin, Texas again. The LK99 room temperature superconducting discovery could be the holy grail of science and is lighting up Twitter and now called X. Science.org, link provided.
Go ahead, John.
When the aliens came down and gave us LK99, the blockchain, and AI, no, not really. There's a great article in Nature. Boy, tough audience. There's a great article in Nature published yesterday, Paul, that goes over all of the ins and outs of LK99 and the difficulty of replicating the experiment. So it would be great if it happens. I'm skeptical.
Yeah. Next question.
Jack Ruppel for Breckenridge, Colorado. Can Vision Pro icons be built in Resolve Studio, stereo video composited with Fusion? Interest in newsreel editing.
Alex?
It should be able to. I mean, right now, delivering that footage to the Vision is still, there's still some pieces that need to be finished. So there's a new HEVC MV that is the way that you're going to deliver two eyes for stereo. This is a new format. And basically you pick an eye that's dominant. So it's sending out a mono format as well as a delta that is the stereo pair. And that format is not new. It's been around, but it hasn't been really implemented. I think it's been around since 2015, but it hasn't been really implemented. So there's a lot of tools that we need to make that actually happen. But I do think that you can potentially also just send out a stereo pair. And so that would allow you to build those, any kind of stereo graphics that you want.
Next question.
The traveling Turlock Lopez Waterman wants to know if we can get an update on sigraph.
Alex?
Well, sigraph hasn't started yet. I'm down here. I came down on Thursday, and then yesterday spent a day at what was called the Production Summit. So the Production Summit is a fairly new get-together that happens right before sigraph. And, I think there was a lot of partners there. Microsoft and AMD and Blackmagic and many, many others are all, we're all there. Paul Dubevic, who, is one of the folks that really helped start photogrammetry. And I also saw Greg Downing, who's the other one of the folks that really helped start this up. We're both there. Paul led a panel and then also talked about magenta green screen, or magenta green screen, which was a really fascinating talk. It's not designed for production yet. It's just R&D. Now, Paul is part of kind of the R&D group at Netflix, and they're basically taking the green out of the lighting for the people in the foreground, and then what that does is it makes their key way better. Now they're also slightly magenta, and then they're using machine learning to basically pull out the magenta. So in AI, so they're taking AI and machine learning. They're basically they look at them under regular white light. It learns from that, and then they use that to recolor them. So instead of using AI to take the edge out, which is really hard, they found that just coloring, getting their color back was actually not hard, or not as hard. So they're doing this, and it was a fascinating process there. The other big thing that was really popular there were NRFs, neural radiance fields, and so these are a new way of looking at, instead of photogrammetry where you're building geometry and you have textures and everything else. NRFs are able to display that 3D information, the parallax and everything else, but you can't change the textures, you can't change the models. It's kind of it knows, it can just reproduce what you have. Now the downside of that is it's not very flexible. The upside of it is it takes a lot less to do it. So all the work that we do for photogrammetry and all the work that we do to build models, they were showing people using Insta360s to shoot images along down a path and in spheres, and then be able to generate from just those spheres, be able to generate a NRF of this whole location you can kind of move around and walk around in from that point of view. So I think for a place where it makes sense, you want to give a tour of a house that you want to try to sell, NRFs could be really useful because you don't need all that geometry. You just need them to see what the place looks like. For previs, for those kinds of things. For actual production, probably a little ways away. I mean, they have to figure out a couple more things before it's going to be useful for us to use in production. But for capturing, and the great thing is what we do to get photogrammetry is also the same, relatively same technique as NeRFs. And so you can get all that data and have it if you needed it, but you can convert it to NeRFs, which is a much lighter to move around.
Yeah, and following up on that, we will be live from office hours is going to be live from SIGGRAPH Tuesday from 4 to 6 Pacific time and Wednesday from 1 to 3 Pacific. So we're excited. We're going to have a team on the ground, and should be a good. I know the crew has been working really, really hard to produce a great show. So join us and check that out. Next question.
From Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. What are the advantages of encoding WebM video format for YouTube as the intended destination? It seems that this is the final rendering YouTube to most video uploads.
Oh, wow. Alex?
Yeah, I don't know of anybody rendering WebM to upload to YouTube. I mean, it might happen. I guess people do it, but everyone that I know is usually doing an H.264 and then uploading it, or even ProRes, depending on what they want to do, if they want to let YouTube do all the work. While YouTube does make that the final delivery, I've not seen anybody use that as a mezzanine structure to upload to YouTube. I don't think I would. I may be wrong, but I don't understand why you would do that compression to upload to YouTube when you can do H.264.
Tim, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, my workflow is a little bit slower paced than a lot of influencers. You know, I upload a video maybe every week or two, or sometimes less than that even. So I tend to upload ProRes, so I get that kind of full quality up front, and then let YouTube do its work on the back end instead of me doing that. Plus, YouTube is almost always going to recompress whatever you send up. So if you send compressed footage, they're going to recompress it. So could get some artifacting there.
Next question.
From Daniel Ferguson, Thousand Oaks, California. In the world of Dante audio and X32 mixers, is the old analog mixer format officially irrelevant, like my Mackie 1604 VLZ mixer?
Go ahead, John.
I have the baby brother of the Mackie. I have the 1202, I think, and I also have the X32 with Dante in it. The Mackies are so noisy compared to anything on Dante or the X32. It's just crazy if you put them side by side. The old Mackies are great for like a live performance in a bar. That's a perfect example of a great place for a Mackie mixer. Other than that, I would never use it in a studio.
Go ahead, Alex. Alex, we can't hear you.
You know, I bought a mute switch, and it made too much noise, so I said it clicks when I close it because I wanted it to be, So anyway, yes, sorry, I'm on the road. Anyway, so the Mackie's got a lot more self noise than a typical digital mixer. You're going to be limited in routing, so you're probably better off with an XR12 or an XR18. Just a little box that's going to do those things for you. It is simple, but also what we found was I bought a bunch of these. I mean, I think actually on the 1204s, and we had like 12 of them because we thought, it'll be easier for everybody to use, but it turned out to be harder for everyone to use because they were over modulating. They were doing all kinds of other things. There's all kinds of things that were there. It was actually harder for them to understand. So we just moved to digital. And so some people really like them because they say that they're simple, but I find it harder to get a good sound out of it.
Next question.
From Talak Lopez Waterman, traveling. How do you monetize a podcast?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways to monetize a podcast. One way to do it is to do it as a service for somebody else, which I've done a lot of. So I'm not making money on the podcast, and they're using it as marketing. So a lot of companies that do podcasts may be there to build their brand. It might be someone to build their personal brand. So that in that case, you're making indirect revenue because you're doing something over here, which is to connect with folks, but a certain very tiny percentage of them may hire you to do something or may buy your product. Products are another way that people make money with podcasts, where they have a product that everyone knows that they're selling, and that might be some kind of commercial product, that might be a service, that might be t-shirts, it could be anything, and so that is another way for them to make money indirectly from the listenership. Then you have advertising. Advertising, of course, is people just saying brought to you by, or someone doing a live read, and that depends on the vertical of your podcast to how much you can charge. So usually we think about the cost per thousand. So basically, if you are a very wide podcast, your cost per thousand is typically in the $2, $3, $4 range. So for every 1,000 people that are going to listen to this, you might make $2 or $3. YouTube is kind of in that realm oftentimes. As you go vertical, I know some podcasts that can charge up to $200 per 1,000. And that's because they're in a highly vertical, expensive market that is hard to reach. So if they prove they've got 10,000 people or 20,000 people, they don't need to get to 100. They don't need to get to 1 million. But 10,000 people might generate them $2,000 a show because of that highly vertical nature. So advertising is another way to do it. Membership is another way. So people could either subscribe in something like Apple Podcasts or in a variety of other ways to do it. Or you could have your own separate membership that you build in Discord, those kind of things. So those are the various ways that I've seen people monetize their podcasts.
Next question.
And we can't hear you.
Robert,
we can't hear you.
Robert is now heard. Welcome back. Paul Wahas from Austin, Texas, for the non-lip reading audience, is writing, as much as the United States swelters under record heat, Amazon drivers and warehouse workers have gone on strike in part to protest working conditions that can exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit. What other ways has the heat impacted our tech economy?
Alex?
I mean, it's only the beginning of this impact. Of course, the heat is going to mean that it's going to be much drier. I'm in Northern California, so I expect a very heavy fire season. So we already start to see some fires occurring, but that's going to be something, and that can affect a lot of other things there. Of course, you pay a lot more attention to the cost of doing business in a lot of places is going to become more intense as the air conditioning costs and everything else starts to go up. You're going to see the other challenge that we get into in California is that our electrical grid, I know it's a big state, but our electrical grid is very fragile in California. And so the result is that we get into a situation where we have so much solar in California that we get into a situation where it's really, in the really hot days of August and September, we can get into a situation in the evening or late afternoon where there's not enough solar power to keep the grid up. So what ends up happening is we lose power at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock for a couple hours until people turn their air conditioners off. And if it stays, so there's there's really these chain reactions that we're not really built for. So I think that we potentially can see some power issues. A lot of us, especially in these days, make sure that we have, when we do major events, we have generators. We have a lot of other things that we're ready to not depend on our power grid. So anyway, so those are, I think, power, additional costs, and obviously workers in an unforgiving situation.
Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, is the Yamaha DM3 the Mackie 1604 of the digital era?
Go ahead, Alex.
I'd be tempted to say the X32 is more of that kind of generalized, and really the Mac. What was the cost of the Mackie 1604? What is the? Trying to think of the. I don't remember how expensive it was or how much it is
I think
now.
it was like $600, something like that.
Yeah, so I would say that at that price point, I'd be more tempted to say the XR18 is probably closer to the same. It's close to the same price point, has I think most of the features, just a different form factor.
Next question.
From Tommy Chance in St. Paul, Minnesota. Is there a QR code on the office hour site or after hours for donations? I've seen artists and nonprofits use them. Are they difficult to set one up?
Go ahead, Alex.
We're testing the donate button. So we have one, and we'll probably be more open to it and show it. We've been kind of testing to make sure it works. Some of you have graciously given us a little bit of money. We appreciate that. And so you can donate. If you go to the About section in our website at the bottom, there'll be a button that says, I think, sign up, and there's another button that says donate. That button's there. We'll make it more, we're kind of slowly making that available out there. So we don't have a QR code yet, but we do have a place to do that if people do. We wanted to see how many, we haven't said anything until now. Wanted to see who found it without us saying anything. There was a little bit of some market research there. So, but we'll probably talk about that a little bit more in the future.
Go ahead, Robert.
What would be a good backend to use that, like Stripe, or what sort of payment system would you be using for that?
We're using a donate. I think it's called DonorBox, I think is what we have. I have to admit, I'm not managing it directly, but there's an organization that manages just donations for 501c3s, and that is that manages e-commerce on your website to do that, to make sure that it's kind of they're managing it in the way that needs to be managed. And so I think it's DonorBox, but I'm not 100% sure.
Go ahead, Tim.
And maybe a little bit of a question to add on to that. Well, you just mentioned that that office hours is a 501c3, right? Yep. So it's a nonprofit. A lot of companies offer matches for donations to nonprofit organizations. So if you're going to slide a little bit into office hours, see if your company matches that. And there's some organizations that, or there's some systems that work directly with companies. Do you know which ones do that, make that possible? The first name that comes top of mind is called Benevity. I know there's a few of those organizations, and I think most companies use a third party to manage that, right? So I don't think the company does it directly. They partner with a group like that.
Right. So what happens is that if we build a relationship with Benevity, then it's easy for the corporations that do matching, donations they use the Benevity internally, or the individuals would use that, right? To give money direct to us. Yeah. We'll do more research on that.
Just a reminder, our producers can submit questions and vote on the questions that they want us to talk about first at any time. Next question.
From Tulog Lopez Waterman, has anyone tried the new HDMI input feature on iPadOS 17 beta?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I have. And so with some of my webcams, it's worked perfectly. It just, as soon as it pops in, it goes, oh, that's your camera. Like I didn't have to choose it. I didn't have to look at it. It just popped up. And so that was successful. I have not been able to get it to work with the Link 360 or my ATEM. I thought that would be, someone had said that they got the ATEM working because it should just look like a webcam, but I was not successful at doing that yet with the iPad. But definitely some run-of-the-mill, 4K webcams or whatever, it just popped right on.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In the age of virtual presence, what new habits and norms associated with interacting people have been modified or changed? What might be the positive or negative effects from this new culture in the future?
Go ahead, Alex.
I think that there's definitely a informality. I was just at an event with hundreds of people yesterday, and there is an informality where I think people talk about that kind of bouncing around thing. But I spent the whole day like someone going, "Oh, you should talk to this person. You should talk to this person. You should talk to this person." I realized, and I got a lot done and met a lot of people very, very quickly by being there. So I do see that there's a certain value in being in person. I think that it's still like I had to come down. I had to do this, and I will admit, and this is what events are grappling with. If the event that I went to yesterday had been available online, I probably wouldn't come. Like I would have just, I probably would have stayed up. Now it would have been worth it because I got to play. There's a big expo, but I realized that expos at these events are actually going to become more and more important because a lot of us, most of what we do is go to the expos. You have to have things that you want to play with. If you're just there for the actual content because when you're sitting I have to admit, when I was sitting in a session, I was like, I could have done this at home. Like I could have, especially when there's not much Q&A. I just go, well, I could have done. There was some Q&A, but there wasn't as much as I'm used to here. But there was definitely a lot of like, if people are just sitting around talking, I'd rather them do that through Zoom. I don't, in the comfort of their own home, and it's so much lifting to bring them into a room. But what I did enjoy is hanging out with people, talking to people, playing with new equipment, that kind of stuff I think was very interesting. So I do think that we're going to end up where the expos and the things that you want to play with and you pay more attention to how people socialize and how they look at things as opposed to the actual sessions, because the sessions I think you could do year round over Zoom and then actually come for Q&As and come to talk about it and come to do those things, but not necessarily make that the core of an event.
Yeah, I think it's interesting in education after the pandemic, we figured out how to do things like how to have an anatomy lab, how to have a chemistry lab safely virtually. And it's kind of, to your point, Alex, made those expo things so much more important in the Q&A and interaction part of it. Next question.
From .ep in Austin, Texas, the Writers Guild of America, WGA, met yesterday with representatives of the Alliance of Motion Pictures and Television Producers. Are we getting close? And what is their stance on AI?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I don't think we're getting any closer. I don't think that's so. I obviously they writers want to use AI as a brainstorming tool, but they don't want producers to use it to replace them. So it's a very tricky little business that they're asking for there. But they started meeting. I think that we're probably still pretty far away.
Next question.
Paul Wallace from Austin, Texas. Has anyone had success using OpenCore Legacy Patcher to get old Macs to run newer MacOS ES like Big Sur or Sonoma?
Go ahead, Alex.
I know people who are doing this and they've said that it was successful. I would never do this. It just seems like it would be so much work for something that you're not going to get much more performance out of it. I'd rather just buy a base level Mac Mini, which is probably going to be faster than whatever you're putting this on.
Next question.
Here we are with Douglas Carmichael. Zoom is now requiring employees who live within 50 miles of a Zoom office to come into the office at least 2 days a week. Considering Zoom has been driving the remote first era, do you think this is a broader sign of a shift back to normal?
Go ahead, Alex.
Remember, it's only the requiring employees that live within 50 miles of an office. It's not requiring employees to come back. Zoom has probably got some of the most progressive solutions to this, and I think that it's not really going back to normal. It's not going to go back to normal. What's going to happen is that the tools are going to keep on getting better to be remote, and people are going to do more and more of that type of remote work. And as those tools get better, basically startups and mid-sized companies that are not typically competitive with corporate are going to use their ability to do this to peel off the best employees out of those corporations. And so I think that you're not going to see it going backward. It'll feel like it's going back because the corporations are going to try to pull people back. They're trying to do that right now. But what you constantly are seeing are some of the best employees. I know employees that are happy with their job, happy with how much they're getting paid. And they really love what they do. But where they live after COVID has become more important. and they're actually thinking about leaving the company they're with because of having to go back to the office. And that should terrify companies, that someone can be happy with their coworkers, happy with their pay, happy with their job, and because you're turning this one dial, they're willing to leave. That's a pretty high indicator that something has got to change, because many of those employees are going to be some of your best employees. And so they're more mobile, and they're going to continue to move. So it's not that the companies are going to go under tomorrow. It's not that no one's going to show up. It's this kind of slow drawdown of talent, where they just slowly move to the things that are more flexible, because these tools to make these companies more flexible were accelerated dramatically during the pandemic. And so it's not something that you're going to see in the next year or two. It's something you're going to see over the next decade. You're going to see many companies become much more flexible.
Next question.
From Dave Troutman, Edmonton, Canada. The production summit mentioned earlier showed the Netflix magenta compositing experiment. Is this difficult for performers to work in?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about it before. So you put this, now number one is that color is not this really, really bright saturated magenta. It's just a little magenta. But they did talk about the concern that actors might not like to look at that the whole time. One of the things they've been doing is doing this idea of, if you run it where it's turning on and off, so it's actually turning that channel back on at a cadence that it looks normal to the actors, and has to be about 144 frames a second, but it looks normal to the actors, but the camera can still see, the camera is synced to that. So the camera opens and shuts and gets its frame before the actors see the normal frame. And if it's a high enough frame rate, it doesn't look like it's flickering, and they simply just get to see, it looks normal to them, but the camera's getting what it needs. It's a very interesting puzzle that they're still working on. Again, not using it in production. They're just simply figuring this out. And what they're really working on is how to normalize. They're doing all of this machine learning and all the AI to really figure out how, what is the nature of compositing, so that somewhere in the future we don't have to do all these tools. So this is really just an R&D project at the moment, but we should keep our eye on it. It's a really interesting thought process.
Next question.
My question, following up to Josh's questions earlier about YouTube transcoding, and kind of along the lines of the concept of, if you start at a higher format, and when you transcodes down, it should be better. So would using a higher resolution format uploading to YouTube help with the YouTube transcoding quality?
Go ahead, Alex.
Sometimes. So one of the things that we found was that now you could put up an 8K file or whatever, and it'll just make an 8K version of it. But one of the things that we found is that sometimes if you compress a very high quality H.264, we actually found that sometimes looks better than a ProRes file, and we think that it's because we're doing a quantization pass that we've tuned to that content. And it gives YouTube a little bit of a cheat sheet of where to go, whereas ProRes is going into a generalized compression that YouTube does for everything. And sometimes we found in certain places that our H.264 looked better than the ProRes file. But you definitely want to upload in the highest resolution you produced it in. So if it's 8K, you can put it in 4K definitely. And that is definitely going to look better on YouTube.
Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, if you have the luxury of being able to test your workflow, certainly try these things, right? Alex just mentioned that they've kind of tuned their system a little bit, and it's great if you have the option to find a video that's representative of the work you're going to do, and put out a ProRes, an H.264, and 4K, 1080, all the different things, and just get those up on YouTube and see how they do, and maybe even upload them a couple of times, because to see if YouTube picks a different day. I'm not an expert on that end for sure, but certainly test your workflow and try the different things out with your content.
Next question.
David Brady from New York, New York. Has anyone seen Jalinga? We had a virtual demo earlier this week. And at first I was skeptical, but this seems like a compelling Minority Report-esque way to add some wow to your virtual presence. And there is a Jalinga.com link.
John?
There's a lot of guys on YouTube that use a piece of glass to do this. There's a guy down in San Diego, as a professor that teaches math on this, and then he uses ultraviolet lights up in the screen, and so he uses fluorescent markers that really shine on screen, and even John Idelson has one of these small pieces of glass that he can write on, and then using OBS they flip the screen around so the text is the right way. So easy to build yourself, Dave. I'm super inquisitive to know what they're charging for this thing, because I don't see any thing there that you couldn't build yourself.
Next question. Robert, we can't hear you.
Hi, welcome back. From Daniel Ferguson, Thousand Oaks, California, what products can help remotely support and troubleshoot TV and AV tech needs for elderly parents?
Go ahead, Alex.
I'm going to do something we usually tell the panelists not to do, is that I thought I raised my hand, but I may not have, because I'm on a little laptop and I've got all this stuff laying around, but I feel very strongly about the last question, which is that it's a horrible idea. Stop. People need to stop doing that. Like it is driving, as a presenter, it means that you now have to sit inside of this format. Get an A10 mini, get get something you're going to use as telestration. My app is going to come out soon. But there's other people that have apps. There's Video Pencil. There's other things you can draw on. You can key your Keynote over top of it, over black. I really wish Keynote knew how to do key fill, but that's a whole other thing. But building a station that does this is so much more flexible. I keep on changing mine all the time for whatever the price. I have 5 Mac Minis stacked up to do various things, clocks and my telestrator, my apps and everything else. And it's probably less money than this thing costs. And it is much less trouble than this thing is. And I would run rings around them because, okay, when I want to show you an app, how do I do that? When I want to do this, it is so confining for how you have to stand or sit or whatever. The camera has to be at a certain angle. The whole thing has to be there. This is a dumb idea. I'm sorry. I've had time to think about it. Then I just think that if we didn't have A10 minis and we didn't have the ability to composite, we didn't have other things to do, you'd be able to do that. And if I wasn't in a hotel, I would show you most of what they're showing, from my home kit. But I could be sitting in my office with something, and then as I want to change what I'm showing, and as I want to bring in video, and as I want to do all these other things, I'd be able to do it. And so I feel like people adopting something like that is actually going to slow down our ability to evolve our event. So I've gone from if you want to do it, okay, to being a little aggressive about it, because it's really, I just feel like it's dumbing down events. We have to be very careful of people wanting to go back into the cave because they're scared of the open area. This is like cave drawings. It's so, get out of the cave, do something new. But our tools to do it digitally are so much more refined. And this is created by people who want to go back to the old way because that's what they know how to do. And so I guess, sure, but I just think it's a horrible idea. I just think that they should learn how to do it in a modern way.
Robert?
Well, and this was the old way back in the 80s on ABC7 New York. And there's a flashback app that goes to all these places. And he's very talented at writing backwards.
Right, exactly. Anyway, so sorry, I had to.
That's your fun answer.
I wasn't able to get the answer in there, and I was just like, oh my god, I don't even want this to. I just don't want to start. I don't even like having the conversation anymore about it because it's just. When it came out, I was interested. That's interesting. And the more that I've thought about it, the more I've built up my kit over the last year, and last couple of years, I just feel like people need to use. Here's the problem with that one too, is they start now they're adding all these little buttons and all these little things that can pop up. And it's you're now stuck in their interface. I have a Stream Deck and I have I have all these little buttons that I've learned how to do, and I confine it, I flex it to what I want. And when we build studios for other people, we flex that and we build hardware buttons that do what we want them to do. Because when you have all these buttons on the interface, like on my little Telestrator app that I have, there is no interface ever, like unless you say want to change settings. And the reason for that is so that the operator can be totally present with what they're doing. And I feel like this will be hard to learn. And then again, it just locks you to where your camera's going to be, and it's going to be complicated for lighting and complicated for the background, and it complicates all kinds of things in production. Especially like with mine, I can show you another camera angle and then draw on that. I can take Zoom coming from Zoom, bring it in and draw on that. You can't do any of those things with this piece of glass. Anyway, I just need to say, like, we need to kill this idea. so that's all. Like, I haven't actually had to see it in the wild, which makes me feel better, but I don't think it's a good idea. All right. I think where it's confusing now, because this is why we don't let people do what I just did, is that that now we don't know where we're at. So I'll just jump into the next question, because I think Laura already threw it to me for that. As far as remote AV tech issues, one of the things you want to look at is how you're going to remotely control it. I would recommend the potential of, if you really want to get serious about it, is something like a Mac Mini or a PC that you can jump into from remotely. So you ought to be able to have AnyDesk or Apple Remote Desktop, something in that area where you can get into it. The problem really with the iOS devices and the tvOS devices, you can't get into to change things for someone. And then, obviously what you want to do is try to wire it as carefully as possible and make sure that everything's robust, so that if it loses power, it'll come back up into the state that it was in before. So that's the big thing, is making sure that and I try to get everything into a UPS, but then I take I turn the UPS off and let everything just die, like I lost power, and turn it back on again, and make sure that everything comes back up to that state. That's really where people get into the most trouble, is when they lose power or something gets unplugged and it doesn't come back to the state that it was in. Now they can't find their way home, and so that's the thing that I would, definitely consider.
Robert, did you want to jump back in on this?
Oh no, I think we got it. Alex took care of that. Thank you.
And at this time, I'm going to take a quick minute and remind everybody that next Saturday, our potential panelist meeting and our volunteer meeting. Monday, we're going to do another 2 hours of Q&A. Tuesday, Alan Hawks will be back with us. And you can get the entire schedule in the daily email. Next question.
From Chad Lafarge, Columbus, Missouri, and on the back-end team with office hours. When setting up remote contribution where your talent has a bad connection, what are your options to secure usable internet and make the set look homey?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yep. So that's two problems. So one is to get the internet. If you sometimes you can actually call the internet provider if you have enough time and see if you can't pay for it to be increased. We've actually upgraded someone for a year so that we could have it for a day. so because it wasn't, and we did one where we actually called Comcast and got them to upgrade their bandwidth, but it turned out to be less money for them. So it was a weird, because if you call and say, hey, I don't want to use this service, or I'm not happy with my service. If you're not in contract with your internet service provider, they've basically been taking as much advantage of you as possible. so the big ones, not the little ones like Sonic. Sonic is a good one, but I think most of them are trying to get, of course, the highest margin they can out of every user. And so they charge you what the going rate is, and the going rate is going down. And so what happens is if you call when you're out of contract, they want to keep you in contract. They'll do almost anything to keep you in contract. And so what you will get you back into a contract for 2 years. So if you're willing to sign up for 2 years, the last time we called, we went from our bill went down by about $30 and became twice as fast. So oftentimes calling in will help to do that. The other thing that we can do, of course, is make sure nothing else is on the network. Make sure that their computer is not doing anything else. Make sure that they're on a hard line, especially when someone has low internet speeds. You want to get them on a hard line because the Wi-Fi all the issues with Wi-Fi do get worse. So make sure that everything else is off the network. Make sure that everything else is that they're plugged into Ethernet. After that, we start to go, well, like, depending on who the person is, we've done everything from we've done point-to-points. So these are microwave dishes that get us somewhere else so that there is bandwidth. We've also even put sat trucks outside to get that person back to what we need. So you can keep on ratcheting up what's possible at people's houses, depending on how much money you have.
All right. Thanks, Alex. Let's go ahead to the next question.
From Craig McFarland, Boston, Massachusetts, disconnecting audio devices like mics and headsets to a Mac can cause auto pause or interrupt Zoom, Teams, or media playing. What is a workaround?
Go ahead, Alex.
Generally to keep everything plugged in. so you try not to unplug things. Getting some kind of mixer. I'm in a Mix Pre 3, but getting some kind of mixer that everything kind of runs through, or something there. But I try during something, I try to not plug and unplug things as much as possible. So you really want to find a way that you're either mixing it in your computer or you're mixing it in a piece of hardware, but you're not doing something that requires you to unplug and plug things back in.
Thanks, Alex. Let's go ahead to the next question.
Tulog Lopez Waterman wants to know, has anyone had experience with AI machine learning noise reduction feature in Adobe Lightroom? I heard from a favorite photographer of mine that it's mind-blowing. They like to shoot the blue fairies in the Smoky Mountains.
Go ahead, Robert.
And I say, yes, I have experienced this. I'm a still photographer, so sometimes I do some low light bar or stage photography, which sometimes the light on stage varies tremendously. And so I'm able to pull out the noise tremendously. It does tend to make it a little softer in those areas, but it's pretty amazing.
All right. Thanks. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I'm very curious about blue fireflies, what blue fireflies look like. But they would be hard to shoot, I imagine, because of the blue record tends to be not as good either. So it'd be really interesting. The noise reduction has been getting better and better for years. I mean, so we've been using different versions of noise reduction, and when it works, it is absolutely mind-blowing. And I think it's going to keep on getting better and we're seeing that it happens all the time in our phones. We just don't. It doesn't even show it to us. So the machine learning that's in the algorithms, both in Google phones as well as Apple's phones and Samsung phones, they're doing this noise reduction as you take the photo in real time. It just comes in that way. So you're going to so some of it's happening for us already, but some of it's going to keep on becoming better and better. You can tell the difference by the way, if on an iPhone, if you shoot the 48 megapixel RAW on an iPhone 14, you'll see what the actual grain is because it's not processing that; it's just giving it to you. And then if you shoot regular in a regular format, you'll suddenly see that grain go back in. And some of that grain is gotten rid of because it takes that image and scales it down, and then some of it's because it usually does a noise reduction pass and then scales it down, and that's why a lot of your low light stuff looks so smooth.
Yeah, and if you want a fun little story on kind of AI and in handling low light images, do some searching for about the moon. I don't remember what the camera was or what the story was, but somebody did some tests where they put
it was a Samsung. It was a Samsung. They wanted to make it look like you were able to take the moon. So the moon never changes, based on what you see. So what it did is it would just paste the moon over top of your image, and it would figure out what the drop off was. So it looked natural, but it was literally. I'm sorry, I just thought it was the funniest thing, but it's literally pasting a picture over the moon, and for a while people had no idea. They're like, this is amazing, it shoots so well, but it's not. It wasn't.
Go ahead, Robert.
Just following up with Alex, when the iPhone processes and denoises, isn't it taking images frames from either side of it and kind of interpolating in between?
I think it does. So this is something that we did. The way we took grain out in the old days, in the very old days, the 90s, is what you would do is so we have let's say we have a background plate. We don't want any grain in the background plate. We want to add that grain back in so that it matches the whatever compositing that we're doing. And so what we would do is we would take, I think it was 10 images and usually it wasn't taking 10 images. They're shooting a background plate and they hand us just a sequence of 10 of the frames, the 24 frames a second. So it's basically a little less than half a second of frames. We would get those scanned and sent to us. And then what we would do is we would stack them. We do these image stacking. We make sure that there's sometimes a little bit of gate weave. So we'd have to, align them perfectly. And then you would, you'd set the one above at 50%, then 25%, then 12.5%, then 6.25%, then 3.625%, then 1.8, and you'd keep on doing halves all the way up. And what you'd end up doing is what that would do is the only thing different between all those plates was the grain. And so it would smooth that out. And so I think that the Apple may be doing something similar to that, and some other companies as well, which you take this little, because you're now grabbing all those, it grabs a whole bunch of frames, and then it does that. That's one of the processes it can use to do grain removal.
All right, let's go ahead to the next question.
From Cindy Drozda, Erie, Colorado. I use Lumix Tether app to control focus on my Panasonic G9. Works great on my MSI laptop. On the Dell laptop, when I try to open the live view, the app quits. A warning comes up saying there was an internal problem connecting the camera. Any ideas?
Go ahead, Alex.
The first thing I would do is make sure that that the Windows version and the driver versions for all the apps that are all the subsystems, the drivers that are exactly the same. So they may have slightly different drivers, or one may be ahead of the other one. So, and we don't know which one. It could be the older version works better and not the newer version. So make sure that both of those OSs are identical and all of their drivers are identical. I think that's probably the most likely problem. Or if it's a Bluetooth app, then you got to make sure. I would test both of them to see if they're both connecting properly to Bluetooth. It could be an issue that the Dell isn't doing that properly for some reason.
All right, let's go ahead to the next question.
From Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas. What's the best way to grab a YouTube clip?
Go ahead, Alex.
In my opinion, on a Mac is Downy. Downy 4 is what I use for those kinds of things. I don't try to grab the clip. I just grab the whole file. So if I need to pull something off of YouTube, you take the URL, you put it into Downy, it just downloads the highest quality version that's available. Now I can take it into my editing app and I can figure out what I need out of that to grab. So I haven't, you can also do, obviously on a Mac, do screen captures. If you have some kind of screen capturing software on the PC, you could do that as well. But those are that's what I have found to be the easiest. The trying to get through it and trying to do screen captures and trying to figure it out I just gave up. And so I just use Downy to pull the whole thing off, and then I edit it out in my editor of choice.
Go ahead, Laura.
Something I learned in the office hours community, Alex, is that you can sometimes use VLC. It's not as a guarantee you're going to get it if you use VLC, but still about 90% of the time I can get them with VLC.
Yeah, it's really that kind of, VLC is free. So that's a good thing for me. It's just a measurement of time, and you'll find that a lot of my solutions have to do with how long is this going to take me to do. I'm very stingy. Most people are either stingy about time or stingy about money, and I'm super stingy about time. so I, and so that's usually when I give you a solution, it's usually me thinking, how long is this going to take me to do, or how much fiddling is there going to be in my own time to make that happen? And I find that VLC is a little fiddly. I have it, I use it, but I don't try to do anything other than open things up, to see what they're doing.
All right, let's go ahead to the next question.
Tulog Lopez Waterman, who's traveling, is the LiveView the only company that offers this similar service? I did not want to ask this on Thursday, but was curious. And we had a terrific second hour with the LiveView folks on Thursday.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, we had the CTO of LiveView on the show. I was kind of we're hoping to see more of those kinds of, but it's one thing to bring an engineer on or a technical person. It's another thing to bring the chief technical officer of the company on. So that was a really great experience. I would definitely check it out, because he really got into how these transports work and how how these pieces come together. So anyway, there are other ones. Dejero TVU. Those are both competing services. TerraDeck has its own bonding solution. So there's a variety of them. I will say that I've used almost all of them, and they're not as good as LiveView. That's why we use a LiveView. That's why we partnered with them. That's why we, is because because I've used all the other ones for this as a straight video. SDI on the one side and SDI on the other side. It's going to go in. It's going to go out. For that kind of solution, there's 4 or 5 different solutions that can do it, and I just haven't found one that performed better than the LiveView. And I used to lease 2 LiveViews for about a decade, so that we used all over the world. So I have a lot of experience with that one. But I also had a Dejero, and we've used TVUs in the past, and all of them have been a little quirky. not as in not stable. So that I would stick with the LiveView if it was my choice.
All right, let's go ahead to the next question.
Paul Wallace from Austin, Texas. What are the pros and cons of a Chrome box? About $500 on Amazon.
Alex?
And is the Chrome box an actual, it's a PC, right? Or not a PC.
It's got to be a
Chromebook.
desktop.
It's like a little desktop for $500. I guess I would be at $300. The Melees, and there's lots of little PCs. At $100, there's Pis. But once you hit $500, you buy a Mac. In my opinion, you buy a Mac. And then you buy Macs for a while. And then you get to a point where you go, oh, now I need, I was having a conversation with some PC manufacturers. And there is definitely a world where the Mac is not going to do what we need it to do. And so there are specialty reasons. And then there's power reasons. You can build a PC that is more powerful than the most powerful Mac out there, bottom line. And so there are reasons to do that when you want tons and tons of cores, 4 graphics cards, that kind of thing. There's a place for buying PCs at that point. And I bought lots of them to do that kind of thing. And there's also specialty reasons to do it. I would never buy a Chromebook or a Chromebox. It's just my kids, and the reason that I wouldn't buy it is because my kids have Chromebooks for school, and they have learned to hate them, just hate those computers. They're highly manageable. They're only on they're more cloud oriented, but they limit all the services that are there. I mean, you just don't have drivers for a lot of things. And so you don't have all the things that you need. And I just don't think I think that it, I can see how schools do it, kind of, but I, because it's just a really non-creative experience, to have those Chromebooks. And I've learned as a person who has to support them a little bit here and there, I've grown a new dislike for the Chromebook systems. I have to admit, I love a lot of things that Google does, but this is definitely not one of them.
All right, let's go ahead to the next question.
Trog Lopez Waterman writes, is there a tendency with architectural lighting control systems like Paradigm and Crestron to lock out the end user from making changes once your expensive consultant leaves? Is his part of the future in architecture? And not that I'm bitter.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah. I mean, Crestron definitely lets you lock it out, and there are valid reasons to do that and invalid reasons to do that. So the valid reason to do that is that if you don't lock the users out, they'll do crazy things. Like they'll decide they're going to plug something new in, or they can move something around, and and then it doesn't work, and then they blame you. as an integrator, I've done this. I've built things without the Crestron, and then I come and they're angry, and I have to come fix it. And they don't want to pay for anything to be fixed. They feel like it's my fault. And then I open up the back of it, and they've plugged a whole bunch of new things in, and they've done a whole bunch of and they've got a little button that does something else. And so if you're accountable for it for X amount of time, a lot of times you want to lock people out of it so that we learned to lock all of our cabinets that we built for people and they thought it was so that we would they'd have to call us and pay us to work on it. But it was just don't break it. Just don't break it. So I think that that's the valid reason. Obviously, the invalid reason is if you want to, you want to get paid every time it gets upgraded. But I really think, to be fair, I think most integrators lock people out to keep them, to protect them from themselves. Now with Tlaloc, he's technical enough that he could probably do it better than the integrator if left to build something more creative. But not everyone's Tlaloc, and so I think there's a lot of people that think that they know better, and then they screw it up, and now it's broken, and now it's in a weird state, and then they do something else, and suddenly you end up, especially because you weren't the one that did it. You, as an integrator, you might show up and it's like what could have been a 15-minute fix to move something for them is now a day of work or 2 days of work of unwinding like what they or winding back up what they unwound. So I don't know if it's necessarily always the case. I would say that I think Crestrons are amazing when they're locked down, and as soon as you open them up and let people change them, they are a nightmare. Like they're just the whole system is built around locking people out. So that it stays stable. But Crestron, because now you have all these buttons that don't do what they say they were going to do anymore. They're not operative, and it's really easy to break a Crestron system. A system like Universe is a lot more flexible, in the case of being able to move things around without breaking it. But I will say when Crestron runs really well and it's locked down and it works, it's amazing, but it's often not amazing. Because someone changed something that wasn't part of the original plan.
Okay, let's go to the next question.
From Chad Lafarge, Columbia, Missouri, looking back on the office hour space rocket launch event, that was an amazing project. John, where are you on the next Garage Rocketeers launch event?
Go ahead, John.
So this is the 1961 Estes Nova payloader. See this clear section here? We're taking this rocket and we're upsizing it by a factor of 12. And we lost one of our sponsors. And so we're looking for new sponsors. We hope to launch this in March, but we're still doing, there's a launch in September, which is the Nationals. A bunch of us are going out for that. And then October here in Vegas. And then March will be the next event that we hopefully have this thing built. And it's a big rocket. It's 20 feet tall. It's 450 pounds. And then we're going to I've got the RS Insta360 camera to go in the center of the clear polycarbonate tube for a 360-degree view. So that's the plan.
Wow. Very exciting. Let's go ahead to the next question.
Ronnie Hofse from Norway asks, I need a small portable speaker in a fly pack kit that is already too big. Speakers will be used as monitors inside a meeting room for cross-mixed foldback for each end of the room. Compact, good sound and light. Which one should I purchase?
The trifecta. Go ahead, Alex.
I'm going to actually hope that someone in our one of our viewers will put it. I just can't think of I'm in my hotel room and I have a speaker and I just can't picture what brand it is that we use. But we have a couple of these little production speakers. A lot of them are small. A couple things that are usually we usually get ones that are self-powered, so that all you have to do is run not an Ethernet, but a XLR to them, and so they can be self-powered. What you want to avoid is having something, and you have to decide whether you want to be able to attenuate that signal at the speaker. Usually they have a little attenuation there, which works well. You just have to make sure that you're normalizing that. But there's a variety of different production speakers. KRK makes some, obviously Genelec makes some that are all a little, small, but there's some less expensive ones that without being in my office, I can't think of the brand name. I don't know if someone looks at if someone pokes it in there, because I think a lot of us use all the same ones. So anyway.
Fostech 6300?
Yeah, the Fostech. That's it. So that's look at Fostech. They make great small speakers.
Very good. Let's go ahead to the next question.
From Gordon Lake in Los Angeles and on the back end crew, when making a decision to buy a piece of gear, is there a formula for you to use, like watching YouTube reviews or asking in support groups?
Go ahead, Alex.
I really try to, if it's really expensive, I try to use it somewhere or rent it. So sometimes I rent lenses or I rent other things to see if is this really going to work, and the other thing though that I also do is I do pay attention to the return policies of wherever I'm buying it from. So is this if it's Amazon or B&H, they're pretty flexible about being able to send things back if they didn't work. I still am then looking at obviously the reviews. And the hardest part about reviews is I'm looking for very specific things. Like when I'm buying something, what is its signal to noise ratio, or how big is the camera chip, and can you do these? And it's asking the right questions and looking, I'm skimming through the reviews. I don't really care about that person's opinion, but what I'm looking for are certain specs that I think are going to be important, that it's going to get it into the ballpark that I think it's worth at least testing.
Yeah, and I love that this came up here. I was having a conversation with my neighbor yesterday about working on cars and how, younger generations are just assuming the knowledge is out there waiting for them to pull up, so they pop the hood, unplug the wires, then they go to YouTube and say, okay, where do I plug this back in, or which piece do I replace? And, I think we're seeing that knowledge base, or the assumption of that. I'm not saying that's good or bad. But it's certainly interesting that the wealth of knowledge that we have access to is sizable, and translating that knowledge, just like Alex just said, how do we get to the point where we have to ultimately make that decision ourselves by buying that piece of gear, renting it, something like that, so we can put our hands on it and try it out, or try 3 or 4 pieces. But it is interesting to watch. A generation of folks coming up that just assume the knowledge is out there. They go to Amazon, sort by review, and and that's what they buy, and assume that it's the best just because it has the most reviews. So, go ahead, Robert.
Well, in Mukana Tech, Mickey offers up that he finds the majority of reviews on YouTube are garbage, made by people who do not know what they're talking about. So that's a pretty strong opinion there.
and I would say spot on. It's really hard to watch those reviews.
And he suggests he primarily relies on firsthand experience of the hardware to make acquisition decisions, along with information from production partners.
Yeah, that's great. Same for Amazon reviews, right? It takes some knowledge to go and read those and filter out the ones that are useless. And
Tim, the thing that ruined me for Amazon, I still do it. I still look at what people review, but I look for what they're complaining about, specifically, like it didn't last, it broke, it did it, like so on and so forth. I'm more brand conscious actually on Amazon, because I'm afraid of getting some knockoff or something that isn't really going to work. But one of the things that happened was I had a chair. It was a stationary bike I got, and I didn't like it. And I reviewed it that way and said, I don't like it. This is what's wrong with it. This is why it doesn't work. And I got I got an email from the company that sells it saying, please take that down. We'll give you a $50 Amazon gift certificate to take down that review. And I wouldn't do it. Like, I was like, no, I'm not going to take money to take down my review. Anyway, I don't know why I'm so, idealistic about a review, but I was like, the entire system falls apart if people start doing that. And I realized, people are doing that. Like, you're right. People are writing a bad review. And then, especially smaller companies, overseas are, they know that review, like if I see something that has 2 stars on Amazon, I'm not going to buy it, and so unless I really know that that's what I want, I'm looking for 4.5 stars or higher on Amazon, typically, if it's something I don't know. And so I can see that but then I realize I don't even know if that's, like, after that interaction, I was like, I don't even know if that means anything anymore. because they're paying people to take those down. Now, of course, if you report them, Amazon takes that seriously, but it is a real issue.
Yeah, I agreed. And all the talk of AI lately, how many we see automated reviews already posted. I think AI is going to get better at posting those reviews, and we're just not going to know which ones to trust. I think there's still some intelligence there that we can read through and hopefully see which ones are generated. But I feel like those will get harder and harder to translate.
I think that being able to verify who it is, and that they're actually a person, and that they actually bought the product, and they actually are a trusted individual within that community. I think those are the kind of things that are going to happen much more aggressively over time, to just know that we can trust what we see.
Right, and very much like YouTube, if you have a reviewer and trust, you'll know their review, or at least you'll know their slant, right? Or I shouldn't say their slant, but their angle. why is it they reviewed it that way? Do they have a something against that brand or that type of product? So at least you know where they're coming from when they're giving that review. So.
Yeah, 100%.
Interesting conversation. Let's go ahead to the next question.
John Fisher from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Will switching a Shure MV7 from USB to XLR via Scarlett to I2 net any benefits?
Go ahead, Alex.
It can. So by switching to some kind of preamp, the USB connection can be just a little bit low depending on what application you're using for the ingest. So the MV7 might not be quite loud enough depending on how you use the mic. So putting it into a preamp is potentially going to be able to amplify that a little bit more, and you get a louder signal. That's the big advantage. The disadvantage of the Scarlett 2i2 is that lots of things can go wrong with that interface. I've said it before and on some of these shows that I have spent more time teching that specific thing remotely, talking someone through why I can't get audio than any other device that I've ever seen in this kind of work. So that is I have a lot of Scarlett stuff that I love. I have a lot of Focusrite tools that I really enjoy, but the Scarlett brand itself, I think is significantly less stable than the rest of their line.
All right, let's go ahead to the next question.
Daniel Ferguson from Thousand Oaks, California, recently upgraded to Frontier 2 gig fiber internet. Wow. Purchased the new wired Eero PoE wired gateway to get 2 gig to my wired network. What are some other fiber network gateway options people are using?
Go ahead, Alex.
It just depends on the scale that you want to go in at this point. By the way, congratulations. I'm jealous, and I'm hoping that let us know whether you're actually getting 2 gigs or if you're getting 1.8 or 1.9. Anywhere over 1 gig is pretty exciting. Frontier just finished tearing up our road that's outside of my house, so I'm very positive that they put little things on our door that said they're coming. So all of us all the neighbors are all talking about having real bandwidth. Anyway, so I think that hopefully I get pings when I talk about Frontier, but people don't like it. So I'm really curious about whether you like it in your use case. The Ubiquiti is what a lot of people use at home. So I have a friend who, like at our office, we use Meraki's from Cisco, which are amazing and really easy. But the person that I know that used the most Meraki's I've ever seen for his own home used Ubiquiti because he's like, I can't afford the Meraki's. So he uses the Ubiquiti line and he's really happy with it. So we get back to who you talk to purchase it. That's a person that knows 10 times what I know about networking, and that's what he chose for his house. And so Ubiquiti has a great line of tools. Netgear also has some good lines, especially if you're hoping to do any kind of, I think it's the 5200 series is the 42 or 5200 is the AV line for 4250s. Is that right? I off the top of my head, but those are, so Netgear you can have some fairly good ones. If you're looking for the actual gateway to the internet, I don't know how that modem works with the fiber coming in. So you have to just make sure that it's compatible. If you're looking for routers that are going to manage your house, Ubiquiti Dream Machines are very popular within this community. A lot of people like them. They're a little bit more expensive, but that's going to give you a lot of flexibility to really manage your network. I keep on putting it off. I have an older network that I'm very unhappy with. so it kind of works in the house, and this fall I'll be upgrading to Dream Machine, and it's just been hard to get one. I think the supply is starting to go down, but I'm probably going to replace what I have right now with the Ubiquiti system over the next 2 months.
All right, very good. Let's go ahead to the next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, a BBC test pattern referenced a 1 kilohertz G-Lights tone at minus 18 dBu instead of the traditional tone at 0 dBFS. Is the G-Lights tone mostly used in the UK, Europe versus the conventional tones used in the USA?
Go ahead, Alex.
I think the tones are the same. They're all usually 1K there. And I think that the -18, I think that it ends up evening out there, but I'm not sure that with the United States and other countries, that number can be -16, -18, -20. It depends on where you're at. -18 is probably the most popular, but we've definitely seen people decide they're going to peg -20 or it's how you're referencing your equipment. The important thing is that all the equipment's referenced to the same number. So, the exact number is not as important as that everything is seeing the same thing when they're set up that way. But we've seen it range between -16 and -20.
Very good. Okay, let's go ahead to the next question.
Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California, when using a fiber to SDI multiplexer, 8 SDI over 1 fiber strand, is this a better solution than just running a TAC12 with SDI converters?
Go ahead, Alex.
On each.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of times we run, I don't know if it's less expensive, but a lot of times I'll tend to run TAC12s because it's so much easier for me to manage. So I just want to run TAC12, and oftentimes I use 2 TAC12s. And so I'd take one TAC12 coming to the location, to a central location, another one going another way. And this is so that if someone shuts a door, steps on it, cuts it, whatever, I've got a backup that's already in place, and I can get a lot of stuff, and it's easier for me to get rid of later. So I don't know if it's more expensive or less expensive, but you can put a lot more if you get this 8 SDI over, and you're talking about this is a Muxer, right? This is hold on, and I apologize. This one came up, and my kit is not as good when I'm on the road of looking at stuff here. This is a multiplexer that is so what this does is this multiplexer, there's a couple of these. This is not the one I've used in the past. I use one that's made by, it's called a yellow brick. So these multiplexers, what they do is they put different HD SDI signals on different wavelengths. So those wavelengths will, and so instead of using a TAC12, they're actually putting all the videos on a separate wavelength that they're passing through the system. The challenge with that is specifically that with that multiplex is that some of those wavelengths can make hard curves and some of them can't. so you might have some cameras that work and some cameras that don't, depending on the wavelength that they're sitting on. And so that's one challenge if it starts to get crowded and 8 starts to get crowded. So you can, and it's efficient. I would still run TAC12 because I would rather have all my cameras coming in, so if something breaks, I'll usually want to be the whole thing. But we have used them to, grab 4. I've not used 4 signals, 4 signals. The most I've ever done is 4. I don't do 8. Broman makes one that's called, that does an 8. I can't think of what it is, but it makes one that's an 8-channel version, but I've never gone up to that because I was too concerned about putting that many eggs into that basket.
Thank you, Alex. Let's go ahead to the next question. And we can't hear you, Robert.
Welcome back. Which is from JJ McKenna, San Rafael, California, which is the most affordable Panasonic PTZ camera rental house in the Bay Area, looking for a couple UE 150s. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so the most typical place you get the 150s would be VER. VER is going to be, they have them in stock. So that's I don't know if they're the most cost-effective way to do it, but they're the most ubiquitous across the country and definitely here. The other place that if I was looking at renting them that I'd probably talk to is Mountain View Staging, MV Staging. I know they have a lot of those as well. They're not a typical rental house, so I think that you'd have to see if that's something that you can figure out with them. But they have a warehouse full of gear, and we have been able to rent stuff from them in the past. But I have a closer relationship with them, so it may not be. I don't know how they handle other calls. The other one that may have them, but they're really much more film, is a company is a rental house called VideoFax. VideoFax is much more oriented around. The most I've ever done is 4. I don't know if they're the most cost-effective way to do it, but they're the most ubiquitous across the country and definitely here. The other place that if I was looking at renting them that I'd probably talk to is Mountain View Staging. They have them in stock. So VideoFax is much more oriented around film, so I don't know if they have any of the 150s. But typically, when I've needed 150s, we've almost always gone to VER. So that's the one I know the most for corporate style rental.
Very good. Let's go ahead to the next question.
Tony Mobley from Noonan, Georgia is here. I am using my studio setup for the first time in about 30 days, but there is no sound in Zoom today for me. I have restarted, but still no audio in Zoom. I am only hearing by the iPhone.
All right. And we have no hands raised. We do have it. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah. So it would, you'd have to kind of walk through your entire pipeline there. So you'd have to look through it, because if you're not getting audio from Zoom, first thing you do is restart the computer. Just make sure that something hasn't been set up. When in doubt, restart the computer to make sure that it's not coming up in some state. What do you have plugged in? Are you using a mixed pre? Do you have any kind of external thing? If you unplug everything, do you get it out of the speakers? So, try to go through the most simple things to see. Zoom has a test. If you open up in the audio section, you can hit a test thing that just tests the speaker. And so you want to keep on, does that work? Because why that's important is that you want to get to the simplest thing and just make that work first, and then start adding anything else on top of that and figure out where it's breaking. But the first thing is to make sure that you're in a base state. It's restarted. It doesn't have anything plugged into it except power, and you're slowly, and does it work there? And make sure that it's set to speakers is the output. Make sure it works there. Then, and you just keep on doing that. Do that. And if you still are having trouble, come back to us tomorrow.
All right. Hopefully that sorts itself out. We need Tony Mobley on the air. So
yes.
All right. Let's go ahead to the next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas wants to do some shopping. What are the best tech deals at Costco?
Go ahead, Alex.
I think it depends on the day. The best deal on Costco in the past was they had Mac Studios there for like $1,500. They had Mac Minis for almost nothing. So there was. You have to look at it. The most important thing about Costco is to know what you're looking at. What is the outside world price? And are any features been taken out? Sometimes it's like, it looks like the same TV, but it's not exactly the same TV that they're getting. And so you have to be very careful of, like, I've noticed that if I do research, it'll be a 22QXL, but theirs is a 22QXH. And then you go, oh, okay. So like, what did they take out of that TV to make it so much less expensive? So make sure that you're not looking at what it says it is. It's not a 72-inch or a 75-inch LG. Look at the exact product name and then do research on that to make sure you know what it's like in the outside world. So the Apple stuff is usually safe if it's really cheap, because Apple makes what Apple makes. But the other ones can be very squirrely, and so you have to pay a lot of attention. I will say that I haven't bought one from Costco, but the TVs, I always look at the TV prices, and I look at the TVs. It's a great place for me to go look at TVs. So I will go in there and look at various TVs from Vizio or LG or Sony or whatever. I have generally found some online deal that was better than Costco. If you wait long enough with TVs, they go in surges. Typically, TVs slowly become more expensive and higher featured right up until the Super Bowl. And then they become really inexpensive right after the Super Bowl. So usually February is the time to buy a TV. so in the United States, February, you buy a TV. In the United States, February, March are good months to buy TVs, because they do an incredible amount of marketing in January for people who want to upgrade their TV for the Super Bowl. I know it sounds crazy, but that's the pace of how everything has its pentameter, and that is the TV pentameter.
Good to know for sure. All right, let's go ahead to the next question.
From Gordon Lake in Los Angeles. When using ARRI, Venice, and Blackmagic cameras on high-end live events, such as fashion shows, the focus pullers seem to always have difficulty nailing focus. Clients love the shallow depth of field, but is there a better solution? And I think we're dealing with some moving targets on a fashion show.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge really is that short depth of field. So the short depth of field, you have to have really, really good camera operators to make that actually work. So these are typically where we get that kind of camera operator is typically coming out of sports. So what you're looking for, you have to kind of figure out who to talk to. But generally, there are local camera operators that are doing the football games. They're doing a lot of those things, and they are much more skilled when it comes to focusing at a very long distance. Now, most of the cameras they use are 2/3 inch chips, and so they're actually, but they have such huge zoom lenses that their depth of field is often the same shortness that you would see. Their depth of field oftentimes is measured in inches, not in feet. So they're very, and they understand it. Now the problem is they need all the tools that they ask for too. So what you're looking for, you'll be tempted to put film lenses on, but if you're looking for something, you need to have something that has the commands that they would have on there, that they're used to. So, and those commands, typically you want to be able to be adjustable so that you can flip it so that they can zoom in, zoom out the way they want to and get it all set up, because they're used to their muscle memory is what you're hiring them for. And so what you're not going to use is a film lens, a cine lens. What you're typically going to use is something like a Cabrillo. The Fujinon Cabrillo lenses are really popular because you can put servos on. They have their own servos, and you can put the motors on them, and now you can have the tripod-based controls for focus and zoom. And so now, and people who know how to use those, again, sports, your sports folks, they'll know how to use those, and they are incredibly talented at doing that. But it's a muscle memory. It's not something that you read a book and learned. It's not something that you take a film person and they can just learn it. It is something that is thousands of hours of experience, and a point where they think what they want, they don't think what they need to do. You have to get to a point where someone is like they're basically a musician or an artist, on these cameras. And so if you're really looking for that, you're really looking for sports camera ops, because that is as challenging as many of these things. And when we switched over to that for this kind of thing, it was very, like, clients notice immediately that suddenly everything works, and so again, this gets into a place where it's not. Now, the other thing that may work better are some of the Sony autofocus stuff. We're using a lot of the Sony FR7s. Their autofocus is exceptional. But the problem you get into with people going down the runway is there's lots of faces for it to find, and so it can be really challenging for you to stay in focus in that way. So if you're doing interviews and you're doing what we're doing here, see, this is how fast my autofocus works. In that, so that is these Sony lenses work really, really well in that area. The other one that I would look at is also for handheld or moving around is the new DJI 440 camera. So these are kind of their own kind of camera system that DJI has come up with, and they have their own LiDAR built in. And so when you do a follow focus on that LiDAR, there is a Corridor Digital did a review of it. You should watch the Corridor Digital review on YouTube, because they kind of walk you through this LiDAR. But they have LiDAR, and you can sit there and you can see the LiDAR like a plan view of what it's focused on and where you want to put that focus as it goes through. I haven't used it for this. I haven't used it yet, but it is from the videos that I've seen of it, it looks very compelling. It looks like an alien creature. It doesn't look like a regular camera, but it is them rethinking how to do that. And so I think that'd be another thing to look at that might be interesting. The other thing to finally look at is Mark Roberts has tools that will let multiple cameras follow a main camera. So now you have one sports operator, like I talked about before, that is following someone down, and the other cameras, once they've been calibrated and they're using them for sports, they can all follow they'll all follow that framing. They'll follow where that camera is, their motion control heads. It'll follow where that camera is, so that you can get multiple angles of the same thing. It's really useful if you have a running back or a soccer player or something that you could have multiple cameras following them along. I haven't seen it outside of NAB when I'm there, but it looks like a really compelling solution.
And Alex, earlier talked about the thousands of hours to learn audio mixing, right? This is a similar thing that at some point you're going to have a human with that knowledge and that skill and that experience.
Yeah, and I think that education is going to become a much bigger thing, because AI is going to do a lot of the basic stuff, and AI is going to cut a lot of this stuff, and the gestation time. So we have to think about what we're doing, and it can go a couple different ways. It either goes longer after high school, or we start earlier. So the thing is that the way we solve this, 1,000 years ago, we didn't live as long as we live now. So you had to be useful much faster. And so we started training you much earlier. I'm not saying kids don't go to school, but I'm saying that in school, we may have to think about teaching some of these skills. It would actually be easier to teach a camera operator to be a camera operator if we started when they were 6. Like doing their little school things and everything else, we vastly underestimate. I was driving when I was 6, not cars, but tractors. And so at 6 years old, as soon as your leg was long enough to touch, get the clutch on a Farmall A, you were pretty much ready to go. And so we were, driving very early. There was no time I didn't, and by the time I was, 10, I was very facile at driving. So long before 16. And then I only had to slowly learn all the rules. I might have been on the road a little earlier than 16, 14, 15 years old. We're in the middle of nowhere. So driving to friends' houses and stuff like that was something that just became kind of normal. But we vastly underestimate the human mind's ability to learn, and this is going to be a huge thing that comes up over the next decade, is that we have to start, our education system has to transform to actually being useful. Like, I'm sorry, but it actually has to be able to produce results. And it hasn't had to really do that. It produces minimal results right now, and we seem to be happy with it. But we are doing, we're taking the most powerful time of a human being's ability to learn and filling kids' time with lots of things that aren't productive, that aren't going to move them forward, they're never going to use again. And that's going to have to change. Like, we have to get to a point where the way AI is going to affect this is that students will have to come out of school actually able to perform, and whenever that is, and that might be lengthening their time, but it also becomes, how do we make school a lot more effective than what it is? I'm not talking about being a little bit better than what they are right now. They're going to have to come out being a lot better than what, at what they do. And that means that they have to start learning earlier, that we have to start being much more efficient, that we probably have to be focused. Like, if students don't want to do English, we need to make sure that they can read at a very high level, but we don't need to make them read literature because they're not interested. If they don't want to do math, they need to know up through about algebra, maybe a little bit of geometry, in a thing, but then we can just stop doing that, and we can make both of those things with AI. We're going to be able to use AI to make those learning processes much more efficient. And so we can use the AI to make that, but we could pack most of what a high school student knows when they graduate, for most average high school students, to probably when they're about 10 or 12 years old. Like, we could make this a lot more efficient. They have the plastic ability to do that. When you look at a child in Europe that can speak 3 or 4 languages by the time they're 8 or 9 years old, you realize that our brain is way more powerful than what we're doing. And we built this system that was largely based on getting better football teams. So the reason your schools are so big is because someone in the Midwest figured out that they could have better football teams if the schools were bigger. So when you think about socialization and having a big school and being everything, just remember, our education system is wrapped around football, not around education. So we have to start really thinking about it being actual education. Again, high school and colleges have not had to be very effective up until now. As AI becomes more and more prevalent, they're going to have to get very, very good at what they do and be much more efficient than what they've done in the past.
Great question. Just definitely generated a lot of conversation. So we just want to thank everybody for joining today and listening in, especially to the producers for providing all these questions to stimulate this great conversation. And just thank you for that participation, and to the crew to keep this show running, and just to keep everyone connected. We appreciate you. And just a little bit about the stats of today's show. We traveled over 85,000 miles with our questions. That's over 137,000 kilometers. If you want some scale, that's more than 675 million bananas. 3.4 times around the Earth. So we're looking forward to the rest of, or to the coming week. So please join every day, and in a few more weeks, we're kind of figuring out the accessibility Saturdays, and education will be back as well too. So probably once we get through August. So thanks for that, and thanks everybody for joining.
John, there's a mini sphere right outside my hotel in Burbank. It's like the sphere, except it's tiny. It's a tiny sphere. It is. It's an MSG sphere, and it is maybe 40 feet high. So it's like this miniature version. They use it to show people what the sphere does and to test things and do R&D in Burbank. And I've heard about it, and then I looked out my hotel room and I was like, there it is. It's right near the airport at Burbank Airport. It's the mini sphere. I can't wait to see the real one.
Wow.
Yeah. Like a mini Statue of Liberty now. You're going to take that on the...
Exactly. It's like the one that you'd see in Vegas. I think around the other direction, Vegas always has miniature versions of stuff, like the miniature, like Eiffel Tower and the miniature whatever. And they